Hey yo, this the KID, the Kid Capri, man. You know how it goes down. We don't do nothing without no DJ, alright? That's what you watching.
Welcome to the Without No DJ podcast. I'm your man, B-Man. We got two legendary DJs with us, formerly known as the X-Men. Then they changed their names to the X-Ecutioners. And we got a special guest today, all the way from London. We got Mista Sinista, Rob Swift, and Dilly. What's going on, y'all?
Chilling.
Y'all feeling all right?
Feeling good.
Yeah, we good. We good, man.
You
Thanks
good off the water?
Yeah, this water. Liquids
Club.
Liquids Club. Yeah, this is pretty good water, man. I've been sipping on it for a minute. It's good.
Great day, man. It's a
It's
great
good.
day.
Taste the difference.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
So you guys got a new EP coming out. Well, it's actually out.
Already dropped November 14th.
Called The Odd Couple.
Yep, self-entitled.
It's on Fool's Gold.
On Fool's Gold Records, big shout to our boy A-Track, Jenna, the rest of the Fool's Gold staff. They've been really good for us, good for the hip-hop community, good for DJing. And I'm just excited, along with Sinista, obviously, that this project finally dropped.
Yes.
Yeah. How did you guys gain that relationship with A-Track and Fool's Gold?
We met A-Track initially back when he first started competing in the DMC competitions,
Right.
ITF. We knew him since he was 15 years old. And Rock Raider and A-Track became really close. And then Raider introduced A-Track to the rest of the crew. And I have fond memories of meeting up with A-Track at Sinister's house to just practice and vibe and talk all things DJing. Sin, you may want to impart on the day. I heard A-Track tell this story a couple of days ago. You took him to a Common session, right?
Yeah, man. It was, A-Track has always been like a brother to us, and when he started to come up on the scene, it was amazing because of his age and the skill level he had. And we were like, wow, like he was just a real good scratcher. He was really motivated. He was humble. So when he used to come in New York, like Rob said, he got close to Raider, and then it eventually came to me. And he came into town one day, and I asked him, if you want to come to the house and you want to do something, he's with his brother. You want to come to the house and come chill out, you can. So he was like, yeah, I could do that. He was staying at a hotel that was relatively close to me. So I asked him if he wanted to come. They took a cab down. I gave him the address. We hung out for a little bit. And we DJ'd, and that same night, it was just so happened I was working on the One Day It All Makes Sense album, which I was scratching on.
Okay.
And I was in the midst of going back and forth to the studio to do that. So I was like, look, you want to come with me to the studio? You can. He was like, I do a comment. And he was just really open to come. I brought him there with me and introduced him to Common and the engineer, and he stayed with me for the whole session, introduced him to everybody. And he was real grateful for that.
Wow.
And I did it because I just felt like he needed to see something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And he was really appreciative of me doing that. And, we just kept the relationship from there.
At 15 years old.
Yep.
He's hanging out with you guys.
Yeah. He was already champion then at that time, too.
So you guys had to keep it like PG-13 around him?
Yeah, pretty much. We never.
He was like a little brother to us. So
Okay.
I wouldn't say that we necessarily, sanitized ourselves. We were true and authentic whenever we were around him, and I think that's what made him like coming to New York and hanging out with us.
Right.
Because he knew he was getting the real deal.
Right.
But we also looked after him, and he
Right.
was the younger one out the the new wave of DJs that we were gravitating towards, and we just held him down and took him under our wing. But the cool thing is now, fast forward to 2019, he's not a teenager anymore. He's a man with his own record label, his own company, and he blew up, like we didn't expect him to blow up. And now he's reaching down for us. Not that we were in the pits of hip hop or anything like that, because it's like we've been active, but not on an A-Track level active. I'll be honest with you. Like that guy took this DJing thing to levels that we didn't even foresee.
Right.
And he's grabbing us now and putting us on his platform. And for that, I'm really thankful and grateful
Very
to
grateful.
A-Track. Yeah, like
That
he hasn't forgotten us,
Right.
So, yeah. How could he? I mean, I could, man. All right, so I noticed that you guys mentioned a Dr. Butcher. Who is Dr. Butcher, and why is he important to you guys' career?
Dr. Butcher is someone I reference all the time in my interviews. He mentored Mista Sinista and myself. I met Dr. Butcher through a mutual friend of ours named Juju. Juju was in a group, or still is, in a group called the Beatnuts.
Oh, yeah.
With a guy named Psycho Les, and Psycho Les and I went to the 6th grade together. And that's how I met Juju. And Juju just really was inspired and enamored by my love and passion for DJing, and he wanted to see me evolve. And I think he realized that I plateaued, that I reached the level as a DJ that, you know, it's like I knew everything there was to know about DJing from the people that I was studying on the radio, Chuck Chill Out, Red Alert, Marley Marl, studying from my brother. But I kind of reached a ceiling, you know what I mean? And I think he knew that in introducing me to Dr. Butcher, I was going to break that ceiling and then reach new levels of understanding with regards to this art form. And I remember Juju taking me to Dr. Butcher's house. And at the time, I was under the impression that whatever I could do that the DJs that I looked up to were doing,
Right.
if I could do what they could do, then it means that I'm good.
Right.
So I would model myself after DJs like Steve D, Cutmaster Swift, DJ Aladdin, Cash Money, Jazzy Jeff. So if they did a routine, I would go out, find the records that they were using for this routine, teach myself the hand movements, then showcase what I learned or what I taught myself to my friends. And my friends would be like, yo, you're so dope, you're so good. Because no one in the neighborhood could figure out these hand movements. Back then, there was no social media. There were no YouTube tutorials. You would watch stuff, figure it out on your own. And I just really got good at copying. And I thought as long as I could copy someone, I'm as good as that person.
Right.
Took all of the routines that I mastered from other DJs on this trek to Corona, Queens to meet Dr. Butcher with Juju, and got on the turntables and did my favorite Steve D routines, my favorite Aladdin routines, my favorite Cash Money routines. And I got off thinking he must be impressed because no one is doing this kind of stuff in this neighborhood.
Right.
And he got on and destroyed me because he was original. You know, he was original and as technical as I was, if not even more technical, but he was creative and original, and everything that he did was his own, like came from his own mind, you know, and whereas I was doing stuff that came from the minds of other DJs. Right. So right then and there, he took me under his wing because I asked him to, and lo and behold, a couple of months later, I found out that he was training a guy named Joey, who lived in Queens as well, and he's right here with me now, however many years later.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as far as you guys' background in DJing, where did it all start? I know we kind of started at a midpoint with Dr. Butcher. Where did it start from? Everybody's.
I know for me, my father was actually a DJ.
Okay.
And at like early age for me, like 5 years old, my father had equipment. He had these Technique B100s, straight arm joints, and I used to see him DJ, and I got really interested in doing it. And there's times where he just put me up on this chair, and he should just like let me just mess with it.
Right.
Eventually, he stopped doing that because I used to come down and shut the equipment on myself and just blast it, and almost blast out the speakers. So he just stopped letting me do it. But then I got interested in recording. As I got older, interested in recording like radio shows, like Red Alert and Chuck Chill Out, and I had one turntable and an amplifier, no mix or nothing. I remember just cutting with the volume and just trying to scratch with the volume and the turntable in one before I actually got my equipment. That's how I got started. My father was the biggest influence for me to start for myself, you know.
Dilly.
Well, I'm at like the other end of the spectrum, like 40 years after you guys started. But I got into DJing through Rob, really. I met him at a class he was teaching in New York. And yeah, I really gelled with his method of teaching, and like he showed me a lot about the history and the context, and that really like sparked a love for this art form. And I was like a classically trained musician before all of this, so like I feel like I had some background, but it came from more of like my own experience with music rather than like my parents were DJs or any of that, because I saw DJing from more of like the club goer perspective before I met Rob, and he put this whole spin on it all that really took me and has taken me there since.
Dilly, how long have you been DJing?
Since February.
Since February?
Yeah, since February. But Rob's pretty intense.
That's crazy.
In a good way,
So what do you mean I'm intense? So therefore what?
You're a great teacher, which means that you can make a lot of progress in a quite a short space of time. Like I've been focused about learning, and he's really given me like everything I need to know and like the proper direction. And I started from step one with the right philosophy about DJing. So I feel like that's why I've managed to grow the way I have in quite a short space of time, really.
Yeah, and then what she's saying is right. Like Rob is like, our practice sessions are really fun, but they can get really crazy at times.
I can imagine.
Rob is like, yo, you know how to do this, and you put the buttons right there. How many times have you did this? And it's right there. Like, but it's a good thing. It's being that Rob is also a teacher, and he teaches people that way. It comes out even in our practice, but it's a good thing because it's sometimes I'll forget something, and he's there like to help remind me, help me get on point with it, and it's actually a good thing. That's a great thing. So when she says he's intense, he is sometimes because he wants to have it perfect, and we value that.
So basically, you're saying he's Joe Jackson.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much. Yeah, he's a little less intense, but he's there. I'm not gonna say he's heavy, but he's there. He's there.
Gonna turn into Michael Jackson. Man. Well, for me, I started out watching my dad. My dad was a DJ. I used to help him pack his equipment and transport it to different parts of the city, churches, people's homes. Sometimes we'd leave the city and go to New Jersey, and he'd DJ New Year's Eve parties for friends of friends. And I had an older brother that was into hip-hop, and he was a part of that first wave of hip-hop kids immersing themselves in the culture. So he came up like in the same era that Kool Herc, Flash, Bambaataa, Grand Wizard Theodore did. So I had a brother that was into hip hop and a father that had the equipment that hip hop DJs used. So it was just the best of both worlds. And although my dad had the equipment, he didn't necessarily have the records that the DJs from back then that we looked up to had. So my brother would ask his friends to bring their record collections over. By the way, I'm Colombian, so my dad didn't have the records because he wasn't listening to soul or disco. He was listening to salsa, merengue, music from Colombia. My brother had friends whose parents listened to James Brown and Aretha Franklin, and those were the kind of songs that Herc, Bambaataa, Flash were using in a lot of the cassette tapes that were floating around the city of their park jams and house parties. So my brother's friends would bring their parents' record collections over to our house, and they used my dad's equipment. And that's how I started to get into like the whole art of DJing by watching my dad and my brother. I started off as a b-boy, breakdancing, and I dabbled in graffiti. I tried writing rhymes. But I guess having a father and a brother that were already DJs, it was just natural for me to really gravitate towards that element of hip hop. And that was how I kind of got enrolled into it.
Okay. So did you have that storyline as far as going to the famous hip hop clubs in New York? Anybody?
Well, we were young, right? I was a teenager. I started DJing when I was 12. So I'm not going to say that I was at the park jams or anything like that, but I would get the cassette tapes of the park jams.
Right.
And my brother would go to the jams, and or buy the tapes or have a friend dub the tapes for him. So although me personally, I wasn't necessarily there witnessing the birth of hip hop,
Right.
I'm old enough to remember it happening and kids just breakdancing on random street corners in Queens, New York City. And as far as clubs, there was a venue, there was a roller skating rink on 69th Street and Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights, Queens, called USA.
Right.
And so it was a roller skating rink, so it was all ages. But at night, like from let's say 8 to 12, they would have these concerts. So groups like Run DMC, Fearless 4, Cold Crush Brothers, Just Ice would go there and perform. And being it was a roller skating rink, it was like all ages.
Right.
So those were my first experiences with concerts. I remember my brother took me to see Just Ice perform once. And Just Ice is a member of the 5% Nation of Islam. And my brother at the time was a 5%er too, and he was friends with Just Ice. And there's a lyric in one of Just Ice's songs where he uses the word or term universal. Right. And that was my brother's name. So at that point in the song, Just Ice says universal, and he points at my brother, and I remember looking at my brother like Just Ice just said your name and pointed at you. That's like crazy. My brother became a god, like as if he was already not a god to me. He became just a greater force to me because he knew this rapper that was just hot. And those are like my memories of concerts, going to USA, watching the artists that were popular in the 80s, and just falling in love with hip hop and performing. And it's just crazy to hear myself say that because now I'd like to think that Sin and I are those artists that younger people are coming out to see, right, interacting with us. And, now we have a young goddess in the making that we're trying to kind of mold and prepare to kind of carry the torch once we're done and stuff. So, yeah, it's crazy to think about where we started and where we are now.
Right. Now, Dilly, let's talk about your hip hop history as far as maybe clubs, listening to music. How did it all begin for you in February?
All right. A few months ago.
Well, like my experience with hip hop goes back further than February. Just to put that out there. My life, guys. But yeah, like I grew up in London where like it's more, I'd say like Caribbean and electronic music, but I definitely remember listening to like Ice Cube and like Snoop Dogg on my way to school and like getting a feel for the flavor. But obviously I didn't have that education understanding of like where it all came from, so it didn't necessarily mean that much to me at the time. I was like, okay, I like this is a bop, I'll do it. And obviously like me and my friends shared that kind of music. At the time we were listening to a lot of Kendrick, J. Cole, like more of the modern stuff. But as I've like moved to New York, obviously like the culture is still really strong here, and meeting all of these like hip hop legends has really like deepened my appreciation for the culture. Rob's like put me onto so much. Like he showed me all the documentaries. Like we have our weekly sessions of Wild Star, Beat Street, Flashdance, like understanding like all the 4 elements of hip hop. And like I've even taught a class on like the history of hip hop now because of like everything that's been like passed on to me. And I think it's like such a special message that it's more than just the music for me. It's like the community it creates and the outlet it provides for people, and there's just so much more to hip hop than just the music as well.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Amen.
So true.
Now, I know we talked a little bit about his opening DJ equipment. Let's talk about you guys, what you started off with as far as turntables, mixers.
I was lucky because again, my dad was a DJ, and by no means were we rich or well off, but he worked his ass off to get the state-of-the-art gear. Right. So at the time, my dad was rocking one Technique 1600 and one Technique 1300. And this was before the 1200 Technique came out. So those were the 1200s of that era.
Okay.
And I remember the pitch dial was this knob that you would twist from left to right, whereas the pitch dial on the Technique is like a more of a fader.
Right.
And it's not like there was a scale, so it's not like you had -8 to +8. And I to this day feel like working on those turntables forced me to cultivate better listening skills, how to isolate sounds that I needed to fixate on to carry a mix between two different songs, because you're not looking at a dial and seeing where you're pitching the fader.
Okay.
You know, you're just twisting this knob until the song that you want to mix locks into the song that's playing out of the speakers. And he had this GLI 4-channel mixer that was huge. It looked like a trackboard.
Is that the rack mountable boy?
Yeah, exactly. With wood, like wood framing, and
the kind you gotta take a skateboard back and forth to.
Needles.
Exactly, with the needles, right. So instead of, whereas now you have lights that show you how loud your volume is on a particular turntable, it was a needle that would move. And I just remember having to use this knob to learn how to scratch and learn how to execute the techniques that I was hearing the guys on the radio like Chuck Chillout and Red Alert perform. So again, although I didn't have the kind of equipment that a person starting now today will have, I feel like because of those limitations, I was able to develop in a very sound way, you know? So now you put me on any piece of gear, whether it's a controller, turntable, CDJ, I could work it because I started with basically nothing. You know?
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
So everybody's like, he's like,
No, I'm just like taking in everything you're saying, because like I agree. Like I think starting from like a point where you really have to put in the work yourself and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it means that then when you graduate onto like a technologically easier piece of equipment, you don't take for granted all the buttons you have, and then you really understand what these buttons are doing and how to do it yourself. Like it's not guaranteed you're always going to be able to DJ on like Serato or something. You might get to a venue and they're like, okay, here's a crate of records, like here you go. And like it's just as important to nowadays still be able to understand like the functions in vinyl and like, you know, the modality of like experiencing DJing in that way, because it's a whole different mental state to DJing on a controller. Like I bought a controller before I learned how to DJ vinyl.
Okay.
And getting on vinyl, it was like a musical instrument. It was really like I was coaxing out the sounds of all of this, and made such a big difference.
Oh yeah.
To like how you feel. Like you feel like you're really part of what you're creating, and it's not just, you know, like pressing, scratching sounds. That's and right. Like setting loops automatically. Like being able to do all that stuff yourself means that you have like a personality in what you produce and like having your own voice. I think that's like super important.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Now you talked about meeting up with Joey Sinister. Talk about meeting up with him, and then you guys eventually formed the X-Men. How did that come about?
So the X-Men originally started in Harlem, New York City.
Okay. And
it was 4 members. Rock Raider, rest in peace, and Sean C lived within a 5-minute walk of each other.
Okay.
In Harlem. And then you had Steve D and Johnny Cash, who lived in a different part of Harlem within walking distance of each other.
Right.
St. Nicholas Projects.
Right.
So Sean and Steve knew each other. Steve was friends with Johnny Cash. Sean was friends with Rock Raider.
Right.
And then the 4 of them decided to combine forces because all of them were DJs.
Right.
And at the time, the hottest DJ crew in New York City and nationwide was a crew called the Supermen.
Okay.
And the leader or frontman of the Supermen was a guy named, and still is, a guy named Clark Kent.
Oh, yeah.
Clark Kent DJ'd on the radio. He was on WBLS. He was Dana Dane's DJ. And he basically was the mentor of cats like Richie Rich, DJ Scratch, Plastic Man, Tone B. Nimble. And they were also not just the hottest DJ crew in New York City in the country, but they were really running things. They kind of had a stranglehold on the DJ scene. So if you wanted to enter a DMC battle or a new music seminar battle for world supremacy, these were the two battles that DJs would get in the 80s through the early 90s to make a rep and grow their grasp and name on the DJ scene. And if you wanted to get in those battles, you would have to go through Clark Kent, because Clark Kent was one of the main guys, the main organizers of these competitions. He would handpick the DJs that would compete against each other.
Oh, wow.
So Steve D, out of the four, started to compete and really gain traction and make a name for himself. And in 1990, Steve D won the 1990 New Music Seminar Battle for World Supremacy and put down other DJs that he met at these battles. Diamond J, Exotic E, rest in peace. We lost Exotic E last year or earlier this year. And then in 1991, I started entering competitions after training with Dr. Butcher for a year. And I entered the 1991 DMC as Steve D was starting to retire. Like, he entered the 1991 DMC, and that was his last battle.
Right.
So I was kind of like the next generation of DJs coming out. At the time, I wasn't an X-Men. I was just the mentee of Dr. Butcher.
Right.
And I was getting in these battles, and basically, like what I'm doing with Dilly, Drew did with me. You know, he took me under his wing and showed me the path that I wanted to take regarding DJing, and imparted on me the knowledge I needed to walk the path the right way. Got into my first battle. Steve D was in it. I placed third in it, and I was pissed off because the first and second place winners of the competition were going to get flown to Chicago to battle in the American finals. The battle that I entered was the East Coast DMC finals.
Right.
So placing third, I missed going to Chicago by just one, I don't know, a vote or two.
Yeah.
And I was just so mad. I remember I walked on stage and they gave me the prizes, and I took the prizes and threw them into the crowd.
I still wanted those. I was looking for those needles.
And actually, Sinister was there. Sinister was there in the crowd, cheering me on. Saw my whole journey from the moment that he and I met at Dr. Butcher's house to the moment I stepped on that stage with Dr. Butcher next to me to perform. But what I always tell people, that although I lost the battle, I actually won. Or I lost the battle, but I actually won the war, because in losing and showing that kind of passion, throwing my prizes into the crowd, and I'll be candid with you guys. I got off stage and I was crying my eyes out, like I was so pissed off. Yeah, and like I was in a corner just bawling, like, because I wanted to come in second place. Yeah. And Dr. Butcher went up to Steve and was like, "Yo, man, go talk to my student. Like, he's just like tore up that he didn't take second place. Go talk to him. He looks up to you, and he'll feel better if you talk to him." So Steve came up to me and was like, "Yo, Rob, man, don't worry about anything, man. You did good. Somebody grab some paper for me. I need a pen." He wrote his number down, gave it to me, and I stopped crying right there. As soon as I took the paper, I was like, feeling way better. And he was like, "Yo, man, call me anytime. If you want, you and Drew are welcome to come over and practice with me." And I called him the next day, started picking his brain. Within a week, I was at his house with my mentor, Dr. Butcher. He and Steve had already known each other, and they had already practiced together. Right. But I think seeing me cry and seeing me throw my prizes in the crowd, and him, I guess, just kind of seeing that, like, this was more to me. This meant more to me than just a prize, you know? I think made an impression on him. And within a few minutes of us hanging out at Steve's house with Rock Raider there and Johnny Cash and Sean C., Steve was like, "We actually had a meeting, and we want you and Dr. Butcher to be in the X-Men." And that's how I got down with those guys. So the X-Men already existed before I got down.
Then you just gradually added members. And
so I got down in 1991. Me and Rock Raider in 1991 and 1992 were the guys kind of carrying the torch for the X-Men. Steve D started touring. Sean C started to get into production. Johnny Cash, although he was a dope DJ, I don't think his mindset was necessarily in competing.
Right.
He entered a battle or two, but not at the degree and with the fury that Raider and I did.
Right.
Diamond J was touring with EPMD and all that stuff, and Prince and all that. So it was just myself and Rock Raider. And we retired in 1992 and then ushered Mista Sinista into the crew. And then Sin started to be the one to carry the torch and compete on his own. And for a while, it was myself, Sin, and Raider. And then in 1994, I met Total Eclipse. And by 1996, 2 years later, we put Eclipse down.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you say retired, what do you mean?
Retire meaning back then, if you were going to enter a DJ battle, you would enter it, put a stamp on the scene, and make an impact, and then move on.
Right.
Whether it was DJing for a rapper or a rap group or having a residency somewhere in New York, you would just use the battle as a stepping stone to get to the next level of your path as a DJ. Right. So for me, I always knew that I just wanted to devote at least 2 years of my life to battling. Win or lose, I just wanted to make an impact and then move on to the next thing, which I did. After I lost, or I came in third in the 1991 East Coast DMC, and then a year later, I got in it and won. So I accomplished what I set out to do, which is win a battle. And then from there, I started DJing for a rapper named Akinelli and experienced touring. Right. So that's what I mean by, I don't mean retire from DJing, just retire from battling.
Right.
Yeah.
So that 1991 battle, what do you feel made you lose that battle?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think I lost. I don't think I lost. I think I think I should have placed second. Steve D definitely won. Right. But I feel I should have placed second. But the thing is, in competitions and in just life, you know, whether it's a 9 to 5, there's your phone. Yeah, it's going Dude, on. You gotta put it on mute when we do these interviews. Man. Okay. Good, break his phone. Break it.
That's not nice.
So I'm distracted by that dance. All right.
There you go.
All right. So whether it's a 9 to 5 or a competition, there's always some sort of political chess game going on. And with the DJ battles, what was happening a lot back then was the people that ran the competitions would get or tap the students that they were passing on their techniques onto into these battles. So it's like you had a guy that was hosting the battle whose student was in the competition, or a guy that was judging the battle whose student was in the competition. Yeah. And I was just a guy from Queens that knew no one, only Dr. Butcher. So I feel like the guy that came in second place, big shout to DJ Supreme. Big shout. I this is me not trying to like talk down on him. Like, he's a dope DJ. Right. And I have a lot of love for him. But I personally feel as though Clark Kent, who was the leader of the Supermen, who was mentoring Supreme, and one of the other Superman members, Richie Rich, was actually physically training with Supreme because they wanted to groom him to become a member of the Supermen. Right. If, you know, Clark's a judge and his protege is in a battle, naturally he's going to be favored. There it is. You know, so I came in third. It's that simple, you know? But I feel like I should have came in second, but it's all good.
At least you're not mad about it.
You're not crying
that
yeah,
day.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean,
that day it was different.
It was.
Now, you mentioned the legendary Rock Raider. You met him in 1990.
I met Rock Raider in 1991 at the preliminary round of the East Coast DMC competition.
Right.
Yeah, Steve D introduced him to me.
Now let's talk about his turntables that he had, quote unquote. He had a special case. He was a DJ. He went everywhere and DJ
without turntables. Yeah, when Raider first started DJing, he didn't own turntables. He would have to go to friends' houses to practice. And then eventually, you know, just to give context, Raider grew up in one of the roughest projects of Harlem, New York City.
Oh, wow.
Foster. Projects. So it's, you know, man, like when Raider eventually did buy turntables, they were belt drive turntables. And anyone out there watching, listening to this podcast knows that DJs knows that belt drive turntables are the worst turntables to learn on or to even operate. You know, so if you stop, the whole point of what we do, Dilly, Sinista, myself, the whole point is we're physically, manually operating the turntable, manipulating it, because the turntable wasn't designed for what we do to it. For the most part, what you're supposed to do is pick up the needle, place it on the record, and walk away from the turntable and let the song play. But we use the turntable as an instrument,
right?
And physically doing this movement back and forth to create a scratch, or looping a sound or a word or a drum beat on two turntables, being that the turntable technically wasn't designed for you to do that.
Right.
If your technique is wrong, if you're too heavy-handed, the turntable won't work right. So Raider had belt drive turntables. So when you factor all that in, what he was able to do with belt drive turntables to this day amazes me.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, like he made it work. It didn't matter to him. He was resourceful, and he figured out a way to use those belt drive turntables as if they were Technique 1200s. And I think that's one of the reasons why he went on to make such a legacy for himself, because he didn't let his limitations stop him from doing what he loved.
Now, was there a special process, like he had to put certain felt under the slip mat, or
nah?
It was
the special process was he adapted to the turntable. So me, Steve, Sean, Johnny would go to his house, and we couldn't adapt to his turntable. So we'd be like, yo, we can't practice here, dude. Like, let's go to Steve's house. So let's go to, and he'd be like, nah, yo, look. And you'd watch him, and you would, if you closed your eyes, you would think that he was on Technique 1200s. And then eventually be like, all right, let's go to Sean's, because no one could practice on my set.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you remember what mixer he was using at that time?
All of us were using the Gemini 2200. And yo, like I remember, I just have memories. Yo, I'd go to Raider's house, just to give you like perspective on like how poor he was. I'd go to his house, and I'd go to practice, and then like a roach would like come out of the, remember that? Like a roach would come out of like the cracks of like the fader. Yep. I kid you not. Yeah. And I mean, we laugh because for us, it was just like, it's just some project, you know, we're hood kids. Right. But then on the flip side to that, it's not funny, right? Like it's this poor kid in the projects DJing on turntables, roach infested apartment, but like that's not getting in his way. You know what I mean? And those are the things that, like, when I talk about Raider and equipment and his upbringing, that I think about. Like, someone else today would be like, no, I need better equipment.
Yeah, it's so inspiring for that reason, because I feel like now people start with the equipment and then work backwards, whereas Raider's like such an amazing example of someone who, like, it was like his passion drove him in, like, that's what took him forwards, and then he got the equipment, and then he worked more, and then he got the funds and funded himself, whereas like nowadays you don't hear that story that much anymore, and like I just find his story so inspiring.
Wow, that is crazy. Now, there was a Pepsi commercial with Raider in it. It was Raider and Rozelle, I believe. Yep. Were you guys around for that?
We were around, like we were a crew. But we weren't in the commercial.
We weren't there.
Yeah, it's like we were part of it.
Yeah.
But that was one of my proudest moments of Raider, because as Dilly was saying, like, his passion got him through all of the, you know, having a DJ on belt drive turntables, DJ in an apartment that was like, you know, rodent infested and roach infested, and figuring all that out, right, and staying focused. And now fast forward 15 years later, he's in a Pepsi commercial,
Right.
getting bank,
Right.
you know, providing for his family. So yeah, like it's Raider for me is like a great example of what focus, determination, commitment, following through with what you say you're gonna do, where all that will lead you.
That's right.
Did he ever actually move out of the projects after?
He got himself out of the projects.
That's awesome.
And I was there with him, like when he got him and his girl at the time, Taisha, they had a daughter, and he was like, all right, I got to get out of this apartment with my mom's. Like, I got to forge away from my family now. And he did just that through DJing. Raider dropped out of junior high school.
Oh, wow.
He has a junior high school education.
Yep.
And dropped out, and all he had was DJing, and then his street friends that like were doing crazy stuff to support themselves. And then he had me, and I was like, I feel like sort of I kind of balanced out what he was exposing himself to with regards to opportunities or pathways to generate an income, you know, because I was going to college. So I'd show up to Raider's house with like a book bag full of like psych books and papers that I was working on a train, because I wanted to practice but still had to get this 30-page psych paper done by a certain day. And I'd get to his house and, you know, put my book bag on his bed, and he'd be like, I think he appreciated the fact that like, well, you know, I don't have to be out on the street, you know, selling drugs or robbing people. Rob's going to college and DJing, you know?
Right.
So I feel like, and all his, that being said, I love all his friends were like good people and supported him and wanted him to make a better way for himself too. It's not like they were trying to influence him in a bad way. But Raider, you know, when you grow up and you're in that kind of environment, that's what you see. But yeah, he's a great example, man, of what you could do if you're just focused.
Yeah, that's a
Pepsi
crazy
commercial.
story.
Yeah.
Now, with all the battles going on, how fair do you think they are nowadays compared to back then?
I think it's the same. Battles today are the same as they were yesteryear when I was competing. I don't know, Sin. I don't know if you have any.
They are they're the same. I just think now it's more exposed.
Okay.
Like back then, you really had to be in the circle to know about those battles. Like if you didn't know anybody that knew them, or you didn't know if you weren't in the inner circle, it was really like an underground thing. Now it's more commercial and people know about it. I remember when I was in the '93 battle, I think that was the first year that they started to let the public in, like more the business in, and just seeing the change from then is what it is now. It's more industryed out.
Right.
Where back then it was more like a closed unit, and only the people that knew about it would go. So that's what I
like
think.
More mainstream now.
Right.
It was more underground back then.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on people using more cue points and different things in battles versus back then? You know, you had to mark the record.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything comparable now would be absolute mode.
Right.
So using technology now versus then, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that it goes back to Raider, using him as an example. I think having the limitations that he experienced on the equipment that he started on in an indirect way forced him to cultivate better skill sets.
Right.
And I feel like now, because, you know, DJs of, let's say, Dilly's era have access to state-of-the-art equipment. You know, technology now is so much more advanced than it was when Sin and I started DJing, and then Raider. So now you could buy gear that does half the work for you, you know?
Right.
So, for example, like when I train with Dilly, I make it a point to make sure that although we're using the same gear that I'm talking about, that I'm sort of kind of passing shade on, we use it as if it was a belt-driven turntable, as if it was an analog piece of equipment. So when she and I train, we stay away from the buttons. Right. And then once I know that she's mastered something, then I'm like, all right, now here's a shortcut, you know? So
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a lot of truth to what you're saying, and like I feel like as long as you know what the basics are first, then you can use the buttons like in your own way. Like I definitely utilize cue points in like a way that, like, you know, you've mentioned on some of my transitions, like you like the way that I use my cues in like this new way that you wouldn't have been able to do before. But I still have respect for like the skill and what you need to have achieved first before relying on the buttons. But I do think you can do a lot more now, and I think there's not it's not necessary to to shit on it completely, because you can have a balance between having respect for where you've come from and then also using technology in a healthy way. It's when you become solely reliant on technology, which is then like, come on, you know, like it's like learning a musical instrument versus like playing Guitar Hero, you know, like I think that's a decent, you know, like I think that's a fair comparison.
Guitar Hero.
Just piggybacking off that, at what point did you guys switch from vinyl, marking records, to actually going to Serato?
Well, for me, it was 2005 when I made the switch. I remember doing a tour in Europe, and it was me and a girl that I was dating at the time. And I brought her with me to Europe. We were hanging out for like a 10-day tour, and I brought obviously my luggage, my clothes, and records.
Right.
And I say that, but if you could feel what I feel as I said that, like the physicality of having to travel with records.
I got similar stories.
It's grueling, you know, and just annoying. And I remember I make it a point to mention that I was traveling with my person I was dating at the time, because as we were bouncing from city to city, we were going to these airports, and she looked so comfortable and like free as she was like going from the cab to baggage to security to the gate, and I'm there like lugging stuff and just uncomfortable and just annoyed, and then having to like argue with you know, flight attendants. I want my record stored here, and just all that. So when I got back off the tour, I was like, never again. I'm never touring with records again, because I had heard about Serato and people were using it. So I hit up my contact at Rain at the time.
Right.
And I was like, that's it. I'm going to convert. Send me this Serato thing. And they sent it to me, and I taught myself how to use it in like over a course of like 2 days. And I remember the first gig that I had felt like it was the first DJ gig I ever had all over again, because I was using a completely new piece of gear. And I remember I was sweating and I was nervous, and I just felt like, oh man, like this, I just feel like I'm DJing for the first time in front of a crowd all over again. And I was like super nervous. And then after a while, you kind of get used to it. Now, honestly, as much as I'm a vinyl head and I came from that era, I'm happy that technology has advanced to the point that it has, because it's made traveling so much easier.
Oh yeah. I think I got it in 2007, and I know it was the same thing. I was traveling with my records as well, and Rob must have had his records in like better. He must have had a better system than I did, because I used to bring 12 crates of records, and I used to just go to the airport, tell them to give me some tape, and just wrap the tape around the crates. That's all I used to do. And I 7 and 9 crates of records, and I'm putting them in. It's there on the belt, and I'm like, oh man, I hope they don't break.
Yeah.
I hope. So, at that time I was doing a show in France, and it was with Kool Herc, and it was De La Soul and Kool Herc. That was the lineup, and I bring all these records, man, and Herc comes with this computer, and he has Serato on his computer. He's looking at me. I'm coming out to the airport with all these records. I'm waiting for them. I'm checking. He's just looking at me like saying, what are we doing here, man? Like, what's going on? What's going on?
The irony about that is it's Kool Herc, the guy that started DJing in hip hop, and he has the laptop, and Joey Sin still has the records, and it makes you think like, all right, yeah, I need to, evolve, right?
So that was my calling for Serato when I got it.
So at what point did you guys evolve from the X-Men to the X-Ecutioners?
We signed a record contract with an independent label called Asphodel Records in late 1996.
Okay.
By 1997, we released the first turntablist album by a turntablist group called Expressions.
Okay.
And we dropped a single off the album. And if anyone that owns this single, or if you go on Google or whatever, Google Música Negra, Wordplay, was the B-side, you'll see that the cover says X-Men.
Yeah.
So we were running with the name X-Men up until signing the record contract. And then when the label dropped the single, I think it hit them that we could get sued by Marvel Comics.
Right.
So their lawyers basically convinced us to change the name after we had dropped a single.
They actually asked Stan Lee about the name. They asked his people.
Really?
Yeah, remember they did?
No, I didn't know that.
They asked Stan Lee about and Stan Lee was just like, yo, you can't use
Not
it.
happening.
He didn't let us use it.
Yeah. So basically, our lawyers were like, you have to change the name because we're not trying to get sued or get the label in trouble. And here's a fun fact for everyone out there checking out the podcast. Myself and Raider were talking about starting a super group of DJs from all of the popular, well-known groups at the time. So we wanted to do a group with a couple of members from the Enforcers. The Enforcers were a DJ crew from London. Cutmaster Swift, Pogo, DJ Business. Then we had the Beat Junkies in LA, Babu, Repmatic, Chalk, Melody, D-Styles. And then we had the Invisible Scratch Pickles, Qbert, Shortcut, Mike, Disc. We wanted to do a super group with one or two members from each group. So I was playing around with names for that super group. And one of the names was X-Ecutioners. Another name was X Factor. And we were just kind of toying around with names. The supergroup never happened, but when it came down to us having to change the name X-Men, I was like, yo, we should just use one of those names. So the guys was like X-Ecutioners. We should just roll with that, and that's what stuck.
A lot of people know you guys for laying down scratches and all sorts of different crazy scratches. What was the process then versus the process now?
The process for laying scratches in a recording environment, for me, hasn't changed with the exception of the environment itself.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is, back in the 90s, when you wanted to record a song, you would leave your house and go to a recording studio and rent a room with an engineer.
Right.
And, you know, a room could cost anywhere from $50 if it was like a cheap studio to like $150 per hour if it was in a good studio. And you would have an engineer, and you would go to Sam Ash, which is the equivalent of Guitar Center now, and you would buy a 2-inch tape. And this is where you would record your music onto, this 2-inch tape. And so if you were recording scratches, you were in the studio with the engineer, you know, and you would record your scratches and record as many takes as you needed to have that one good, clean track of 8 bars of you killing it. Now, creatively, you still approach scratching on a song the same way, but the environment is different. For example, I just got hired a couple of months ago to do scratches for a group in Russia.
Right.
I'm in Queens. So I don't have to go to the studio with them. They don't have to fly to New York. I don't have to fly to Russia.
Right.
They send me the files via the internet. I transfer the files over to my home studio, record the scratches at 2, 3 in the morning in my boxers, and then wake up the next morning, send them the acapella files of the scratches. They fly them in, and voila, we have Rob Swift scratches on a song featuring these Russian artists that I haven't met in person. So the process from a creative standpoint is the same. You know, you vibe with the song. You have like a library of sounds and words that you could use to complement the song via your scratches, but the recording process is different. You could, it's just a lot easier. It's more convenient now. And at home, I remember in the studio, I remember thinking, this is like every minute that I take to record these scratches is money being spent. So this is a pressure-packed kind of feeling. And I remember if I made a mistake, I'd feel bad because I'm like, the rapper's here and I know he's waiting to get to the vocal room and knock out his vocals, and I'm taking forever to knock out these scratches. Now I don't have that pressure. I could do scratches, leave, go eat, go to the gym, work out, come back, erase the whole take, do the scratches again, and not worry about there being, studio time being wasted or whatever. So
right. At one point, it seems that you guys, the X-Ecutioners, broke up. Everybody was doing certain things. Why did you guys break up?
Well, it got to the point to where we did a lot of stuff together. Rob started scratching for Akinelli. I started scratching for Common. Raider was doing things. We was doing a lot of solo things, and we all got busy. We got really busy, and then, as with any group, we started going through some things. Like we started going through growing pains, as you would call them.
Right.
And we started going through that, and certain things weren't being seen eye to eye with us. We never really fought with each other. There was never like that, but certain things we didn't see eye to eye on, and we ended up separating. I ended up going, and then Rob, Raider, and Eclipse ended up staying and going, and then they had their falling out. Rob and Raider had their falling out. It's just common stuff that families go through. You know what I mean? You want to continue out because my tooth is killing me.
You need some more water, man.
Oh God. Yeah. Anyway, so like Raider said, typical band stuff.
Not
typical. I said right. Did I call you Raider?
Yes, you did.
Oh, my bad. Freudian slip.
You good?
What Sin said, like typical band stuff. Rock bands go through it. Hip hop bands go through it. But at the end of the day, I remember in 2008, Raider put together a reunion tour of the X-Ecutioners, and we toured Australia together, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah. And, we went through our struggles, and a lot of it, too, was caused by label stuff, like the pressure of being on a record label. By then, we had moved on to Loud Records and Columbia Records, and we felt more pressure to bang out hit songs and live up to the name of the X-Ecutioners, opposed to when we were recording our first album, there was no pressure. We had like this clean slate and we were just having fun.
Yes.
That kind of played a role too in the dissension that took place in the group. But yeah, you live and learn, you get better for it, and at the end of the day, we're still here, man.
Oh yeah. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you do your own battles. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have a legion of students that I teach online and in person at my home studio, and they're called the Brolic Army. And I always feel like teaching is not enough. You want to help your students apply the stuff that you teach them. So I do a battle that starts Halloween every year.
Okay.
And the point is for them to get a feel for how to prepare for an actual competition and how it feels to compete against other people. And what better way than for them to train and prepare for combat amongst their fellow Brolic Army soldiers, as I call them. So
big shouts to Brolic Army.
Yeah. So I have like an online competition, and I basically sequence it like the first round is an preliminary.
Right.
Each of them submit a 1-minute video. I have judges that pick the best 8 DJs, and then the best 8 DJs battle it out bracket style, like a Wimbledon match, for example. And the final 2 DJs compete for the title of Supreme Student. And, I have sponsors and they get prizes. And it's dope because obviously they're training on how to beat each other, but in doing that, they're actually training to beat their real competition, which is the other people that they're going to battle against next year in the DMC or the Red Bull 3 Style Battle or the Goldie Awards.
Right.
So yeah, and then they get like a little fan base. Their followers on Instagram increase and all that. So it's just fun to watch them excel.
And now you guys are known as the Odd Couple. You got this new EP that's out. What made you guys get together and put an album out?
Basically, I was on tour with Total Eclipse and Precision in 2017, December.
Right.
And I came home from touring, and the truth of the matter is that like it got back to me through a mutual friend that Sin was pissed at me for leaving him behind in New York City and touring with Eclipse and Precision. And Sin is my brother. Like, I've known him longer than any of the members of the X-Men or the X-Ecutioners. So when I came back home, I was like, yo, let's start practicing together, because my friendship with you means more than anything. So let's practice together. So we started training together just for fun, recording the sessions and posting them to social media just so that people could see that Sin was still around and doing his thing, and that he and I were being creative together and sharing that creativity with people. And gradually the practice sessions that you could even tune on right now to YouTube, you could go to my Instagram page and watch them, the Odd Couple page. They started to kind of like, I don't know, just grow and snowball. And before you know it, promoters were watching the videos from Sin and I practicing at my house and asking me if I'd be interested in having Sin fly out with me to a particular city and perform.
Right.
So it just kind of organically grew from there. And before you knew it, we had our first show here in Charlotte, North Carolina on St. Patrick's Day, 2018. He and I started practicing together. Sinista and I started practicing together in January. So 2 months later, we had our first show, and we performed at Crown Station, St. Patrick's Day, 2018, and it was the most fun time, and it was dope because Sin and I hadn't toured together like that, like left the city to perform since the X-Ecutioners days.
Right.
So it was just dope. It was like a throwback to like a time when, you know, we were just running around the country touring, you know, showcasing our talent with people or for people. And here we are again, you know, like
full circle.
Yeah, full circle. Over a year later, we're back in Charlotte, North Carolina.
That's right.
With an EP out.
Yeah.
You know,
How crazy.
How crazy is that? So when we first started connecting in January of 2018, neither of us saw an EP in the future. But in 2019, once 2019 ushered in, Sin again came over to the house and we started practicing. And this time he sat down and he was like, yo, now it's been a year. Now it's time for us to release product. And I was against it. I didn't want to. I was really comfortable teaching, and the last thing on my mind was making an album.
Right.
But I'm glad he talked me into it because it's been fun, and now we're like reaching a completely new fan base, and we have something to actually promote, opposed to just touring off our name, you know?
Yes.
Right. Now, are you guys doing the production as well, or
I did some of the production on the album alongside the real DMT, our mentor, Dr. Butcher, one of Sinister's boys, my boy too, Aton Noise. We got artists that this is a hip hop album. It's not like it's a scratch turntablist album and we're just nerding out and just scratching every song. Like,
right.
There are obviously scratches because that's what we do, but the EP itself is a hip hop project. It's a hip hop album. We're paying homage to the music that brought us up, you know, and yeah, it's a dope EP. It's on Fool's Gold Records, and I remember Dilly and I went to A-Track's house to play him the EP before we actually had a deal.
Okay.
And
you brought a cassette.
No, not a cassette. You're lying.
A CD, sorry.
Which doesn't make it any better.
To me,
To her, it's a cassette.
to me, it's
Brought
the
you
same.
back.
Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah, he
my.
bought
Might as well have been a cassette.
bought
Yeah,
a-
like A-Track looks at you
Like,
like,
he bought an
what am I
A-Track.
supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
We had to like go to Rob's car because A-Track fully had no like where to play a CD. He was like, "Wait, you don't email like
Yeah.
thumb drive?" And Rob's like,
CD.
Yeah. Well, so the thing with that is like I'm old school, man. I'm old school, and I came up in an era where like if you were an artist and you were trying to get a deal, you coveted the music that you worked on because you were afraid that like if you just gave someone a copy of your tape or your CD that they would steal the ideas. So I DJ'd for Akinelli, and I remember Akinelli told me that the way he got his deal was he would go to different record labels with an instrumental of his album, and he would rap the songs.
Oh, shit.
Come on now.
Dead serious.
That's ill.
Dead serious.
So he would rap it live.
He would rap it live and then take the tape back with him, and then they'll be like, he'd be like, if you guys want to sign this, you know where to reach me, but I'm not leaving my songs with you. Like, and that's the mentality that like I still have, you know. So when I went to A-Track's house, Dilly and I went up to his crib, his apartment in Manhattan, hung out with him, and yeah, he looked at me like, yo, like, all right, so let's go to my computer and download the songs. I'm like, I have a CD, dude. And he's like, well, I don't have a CD player. And I'm like, well, let's just go to my car and listen to it there. He's like, all right, dope. So the three of us went to my truck, sat in the truck, and it was dope though because like we were there just kind of vibing to this EP, like the way you would three friends back in the day, you know? Mm-hmm. And after the first song played, he's like, during a little few seconds of silence, he looked at me and was like, yeah, I think I want this album on Fool's Gold. He was like, all right, play the rest. And I played him the rest. And he was like, yeah, definitely want this album. He was like, first, let me just talk to my partner, make sure that all is straight. I'm on the same page, or we're both on the same page. And then he hit me back after like 2 or 3 days. He was like, yes, we want the project. Let's put it out on Fool's Gold. And here we are, man. Like, I can't thank A-Track enough, man, because his platform honestly is so much bigger than ours, you know? And it's just dope when I think about the again, more of that whole full circle thing. Like, you know, we met A-Track when he was 15 years old. Used to practice with him at Sin's house. And now he's a grown man and he has his company and he's like thriving and he's grabbing us and he's like, yo, like, you guys looked out for me when I was coming into this. Now I'm gonna put you guys on my platform and look out for you. So A-Track, man, I love that guy to death. I saw him a couple of days ago, and when we was leaving the venue, like I gave him the strongest, longest hug, man. I was like, thank you.
I see.
I was like, thank you, bro, because yeah, man, because he, you know, he's on another stratosphere, man. That dude, like, what he's done with DJing, like, it's amazing. It's astounding what he's done and where he's taken it. Like, Sin and I and Raider and Eclipse took it far. Far. And he's taking it farther. You know, and it's just like, wow, you know. So just super grateful to A-Track and Jenna from Fool's Gold and the whole staff, man. They've been awesome and they're really taking pride in the project and yeah, man, it's just been a dope experience.
Now, you're one of the coolest, most intricate instructors I've ever seen when it comes to teaching classes on DJ. You kind of bounced around a little bit from here and there.
Still bouncing around. Fuck. Yeah.
So what made you want to teach somebody how to DJ?
I just want to make sure that the authenticity of DJ art is preserved. That's it. You know, and I could watch DJs today hit the buttons on the gear that we talked about earlier and made fun of, right? And complain and bitch. Or I could do something. So my thing is like, it's not enough for me to complain and be like, don't do it that way or don't use this kind of gear. I have to showcase why I feel the way I feel, and what better way through teaching. And like, that's why I like bringing students with me on the road or to shows. Like back home in New York City, when we have a show, I send a mass email out or I text my students and I'm like, guys, I have a show on this day. You're free to come and do an opening set or even perform with Sin and I during the Odd Couple set, because I just want to pass on what I know. And having Dilly with us, for example, on this run, like, she's going to rock tomorrow at November 23rd. I'm not sure when you're airing this. she's gonna rock November 23rd at Crown Station. You know, like our return, full circle, getting back here. But now it's like I want to again pass on what I know. It's not enough for my students to be great in my home studio or be great in their bedrooms. Like I want them to experience what it's like to DJ in front of an actual audience.
That's right.
So after training with Dilly, there came a point where I was like, all right, now you're ready to start traveling with us and doing shows around the city. And why do I do this? To see someone like Dilly go up there in front of people and then inspire someone in the audience. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
And it's dope to have a female DJ, a dope female DJ to follow up after you. You know what I mean? Or before you, whichever way. Now, as far as female DJs, who are you guys' favorite female DJs?
I know for me, one of them is Coco Chanel. I mean, she's a cool person, but her cuts are just really sharp. Her and I used to like Pam the Funkster. She was okay too.
Oh yeah, R.I.P.
She was good. R.I.P. She was really good. You know what I mean? Really, what's her name? Shorty is dope. There's a few. Those are like my favorite. Those my top three. Rob.
Well, I'm fortunate enough to have some personal connection to DJ Pearly. She's like the DMC winning DJ from New York.
American champion.
Yeah, and she's like such an inspiration to me because like she's really about it for the passion, and she's just got her head in the right place in the terms of like what I'm looking for in a role model as well. And she's helped me with my music. She's always a pleasure to be around. She's obviously incredibly talented at what she does, and yeah, I'd say she's probably where I draw a lot of my inspiration from at the moment. Yeah, aside from that, like Jazzy Joyce, like me and Rob have discussed her, you know. Yeah, it's sometimes hard to find like female role models in the industry, but where you can, like, big respect to all of them because they're shaping the future for us.
Yeah. Symphony from the Beat Junkies was one that, like, really dope. Cutting Candy from the 5th Platoon. She's just not a dope DJ. She's a activist, you know, and like she's out there like championing like women's rights and all that. Like I love Candy for that. But look out for Dilly, man. She's gonna be one of those DJs. Word, I'm not just saying it because I've trained her. Like I really feel like she's gonna be one of those DJs that really reps hard for the females and takes it to that next level. You know, like I feel like there are a lot of female DJs now that like they do it because, and these are the ones that obviously like don't really revolve around like the circles that we revolve around, like, but there are DJs, for example, like Paris Hilton. Paris Hilton doesn't care about like a technique or like the foundation of this art. And I'm not trying to be presumptuous, but you could kind of know a DJ's pedigree by what they do, just by like analyzing what they do, you know?
Right.
And some DJs just do this for, whether it's male or female, just do this for money or for the social media, you know, currency, the likes and all that. And then there are DJs that really have a respect for the art and want to stay true to it. So in a nutshell, again, like bring it back to like why I teach. I want to do my best to offset a lot of the, you know, the fame that comes with DJing, and you know, like I want to offset that and make it more about just the culture, you know, and the art itself.
Right. How can we find the album? The EP, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I say album all the time. The EP, The Odd Couple, is available on pretty much all platforms: iTunes, Tidal, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon.com. Yeah, man, just support the project. It's cliche to say, but it's that real hip hop shit.
It is.
And it's really dope. And big shout to the artists that helped us put the EP together.
Oh, yes.
Aton Noise, Dr. Butcher, The Real DMT, Chubbs,
Uptown Bodega,
Breeze Ever Flowing, and J Live.
Yes.
You know, we put together this EP with our friends, people that like we came up with making music. So it's not like it's an EP with like marquee artists.
Right.
We just wanted to make an EP that was kind of a throwback to the first X-Ecutioners album, and just do music that we both love. Sin and I both love, and that our fan base appreciates.
Speaking of which, now you know that you you said all those artists. How did you guys record the album? Was it a one-off situation where this person will record at home? Did you guys bring them into your home and record it?
Some, like, there was one song that we recorded with the Real DMC at home, and we actually filmed the whole process, and it's up on my YouTube page.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you see us kind of like setting up the mic, and he's there, like, you know, he hadn't memorized the lyrics, so he was like looking at his phone while he was recording the vocals. I got Sin doing the scratches on camera, just sharing the process of recording with people that follow our journey. Aton Noise, he has his own studio, so he put together his song at his studio. Dr. Butcher, our mentor, doesn't live in New York anymore. He lives in Texas.
Oh, wow.
So we weren't able to collaborate with him in person. So he produced one song, or two songs actually, and just sent me the files. And then I messed around with them in my home studio and put together the song featuring J Live and Breeze Ever Flowing. So we went about it in a variety of ways.
Who mixed the album?
I mixed it.
Oh,
at
wow.
home. Yeah. I mixed the album at home, and with the exception, I mixed all the songs with the exception of Style Murderer.
Okay.
That was mixed by Aton Noise. And then we gave the whole EP to A-Track, and Fool's Gold had the song, the EP mastered.
Awesome. Now, how can we find you guys on social media?
Follow us on Instagram. I'm dilly.row on IG. I have a Facebook as well, Dilly Row. Yeah, I think that's my main platforms.
How about your what is it?
Mixcloud. Yeah, I have a Mixcloud. It's Mixcloud/Dilly Dilly.
Dilly.
Dilly. You know, couldn't help it.
Mine is very simple. Facebook, Mista Sinista, Mista Sinista. Instagram at Mista Sinista. Twitter at Mista Sinista. Snapchat, no, I'm just playing, no Snapchat. So
Christian Mingle. You on Christian Mingle?
Christian Mingle.
Elite singles.
Elite. Yeah.
Right. So everything is at Mista Sinista. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram, Brolic Arm, BROLICARM. You can follow Sinister and myself at The Odd Couple, DAODDCOUPLE. If you want to follow the journey of my students, you could check for at Brolic Army, just Brolic Arm with a Y at the end.
Right.
And I'm on Facebook, DJ Rob Swift, on YouTube, DJ Rob Swift, constantly posting content on this art form. So if you're interested in learning about DJing, whether it's the history or the techniques behind this art form, all my social media, I do my best to curate it in a way that teaches people. So if you don't have access to a mentor like I did, Dr. Butcher, you could learn about this art from afar, from a distance. It's like I'm kind of walking you through a lot of the historical aspects of the art and the physical aspects as well. So check us out and support the EP, man. The Odd Couple, Fool's Gold Records.
Fool's Gold.
Word.
We thank you guys for coming through the Without No DJ podcast. We got Dilly and the Odd Couple, Mista Sinister, and Rob Swift.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.